The rain had been coming down since noon, and by the time I got to the rehab gym at Larkspur Ridge that October evening, the parking lot lights were already smearing gold through my windshield. "You're soaked," Priya said from the front desk, not even looking up from her charting. "I'm always soaked. It's my one personality trait now." I shook out my jacket and hung it on the hook that never quite held, same as it hadn't held for the 2 years I'd worked there. I'm Renata Cole, 31, physical therapist, and that Thursday I had exactly one patient left on my schedule. A man named Cal Whitmore, who'd been coming in 3 times a week since August, working his way back from a motorcycle accident that had left one leg held together with hardware I'd seen on X-ray and tried very hard not to think about while I had my hands on him. Here's the thing nobody tells you about rehab work. You spend an hour, twice a week, sometimes 3 times, with your palms flat against someone's calf muscle, coaxing it back into remembering how to fire. You count their breaths with them through the pain. You learn the exact face they make right before they're about to quit on a set, and you learn how to talk them past it. That kind of closeness isn't romantic, not exactly, but it isn't nothing either. And by week 6, I'd stopped pretending I didn't notice when Cal walked in. "Cole," he said, easing himself onto the mat with the careful economy of a man who'd learned exactly how much his leg would forgive him. "I brought you something. You're not supposed to bring me things. I have a whole binder about it. It's a granola bar. I stole it from the break room downstairs. I don't think that's in the binder." I laughed before I could stop myself, and that was Cal's whole talent, really. Getting a laugh out of you before your guard remembered to go up. He had a slow smile and a habit of looking at the middle distance when he talked about the accident, like it belonged to somebody else. 34 years old, worked construction before the bike went down on a wet curve outside town, and for 2 months he hadn't been sure he'd walk without a cane again, let alone climb a ladder. The question that sat underneath all of it, the one I never said out loud, was simple. Was I falling for the man, or was I falling for the version of him I was helping build back up, one measured degree of knee flexion at a time? Because those aren't the same thing, and I'd seen therapists confuse them before, seen it go sideways in ways that hurt more than any hamstring ever could. "Give me 60 degrees, I said, my hand under his knee, "and don't you dare grit your teeth at me like that's going to make it hurt less." "It absolutely makes it hurt less. Scientifically proven. Cite your source. My grandfather." He gritted his teeth through 2 wars and a bad marriage. He got to 60 degrees, and something crossed his face that wasn't pain exactly, more like disbelief that his own body had listened. "That's new." "That's new," I agreed, and I let myself feel proud for exactly 4 seconds before I remembered I still had to write his progress note, and objectivity is a professional expectation, not a suggestion. I want to be honest about the part I didn't handle well. There was a night in November, a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were slow and I'd stayed late finishing paperwork. When Cal texted the front desk line asking if I was free to grab coffee sometime, nothing formal, no pressure. And I sat in my car in that same parking lot for 20 minutes with my thumb over the reply button because our clinic doesn't have a rule against it. Not officially, but I have a rule against it. The one I built for myself after watching a colleague date a patient mid-treatment and then have to hand off his file to someone else out of guilt, the 2 of them tiptoeing around each other in a hallway, too small for that kind of tiptoeing. "Not while you're still my patient," I texted back finally. "Ask me again when you've graduated." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Is that a yes with conditions or a no with manners? It's a yes with conditions. I don't do things halfway, Cal, not even the letting people down part. He didn't push it, which told me something too. He showed up to his next session like nothing had happened, worked hard, made the same jokes, and if there was disappointment in him, he folded it away someplace I couldn't see, which I respected more than I let on. The weeks after that got harder in a different way. His progress plateaued the way it sometimes does. The body has its own timeline and doesn't care about anybody's. And he got quiet during sessions, snapped once at a resistance band that wouldn't cooperate, apologized after like he'd committed some crime. I recognized that particular despair. Recovery isn't a straight line, and the flattest part of the curve is where people quit, where they stop showing up and you never find out if they got better or just got tired of being reminded they weren't there yet. "Talk to me," I said, sitting back on my heels after he'd gone quiet mid-set. "Not as your therapist, just talk to me." "I had a life before this," he said, staring at the ceiling tiles. "I climbed ladders for a living. I don't know what happens to a guy who can't climb ladders. You're going to climb ladders again. You don't know that. No, I admitted. I don't. Nobody in this building can promise you that, and anybody who does is lying to you. But I know what your knee did in September that it couldn't do in August, and I know what it's doing now that it couldn't do in October, and I'm willing to bet on the direction of that lying even if I can't swear to the destination. He looked at me a long moment, something loosening behind his eyes. That's a very careful answer. I'm a very careful person. It's the job. Is it just the job? I didn't answer that one, not that day. But I thought about it on the drive home, the way you turn a stone over in your pocket without meaning to, and I thought about my colleague in the tiptoeing hallway, and I thought about the difference between a rule that protects people and a rule that's just fear wearing a badge. Discharge day came in the second week of March, 5 months after his first appointment, and by then Cal was climbing our clinic's practice stairs 2 at a time without the brace, without the cane, without the careful economy of movement I'd first met him with. Priya cried a little, which she does for every good discharge and denies every time. Well, he said, standing in the doorway with his bag over his shoulder, not a patient anymore, just a man in my doorway. I graduated. You did. My throat was doing something complicated. Congratulations. Genuinely. So, coffee? I want to tell you I made him wait, that I played it cool, but the truth is I'd been waiting for this exact sentence for 5 months and I said yes before he'd even finished the word. We went that Friday, and it was easy in a way I hadn't let myself imagine. No charts between us, no 60-degree benchmarks, just a man telling me about the first ladder he climbed back on a job site and how he'd texted his foreman a photo like a kid with a report card. It's been 5 months since that coffee, and he still brings me stolen granola bars sometimes, a joke that's outlasted its own punchline the way the good ones do. People ask me sometimes if I regret waiting, if 5 months of holding a line felt like wasted time looking back on it now. I don't think it did. I think the waiting was the thing that made the coffee mean something, made it a choice instead of an accident. And I think about that Tuesday in the parking lot more than I probably should. How close I came to answering fast instead of answering right, and how glad I am now that I let the slower answer win.